start now is on restorative justice and its relationship to trust and to trust building. So I'll give my co-moderator, because I will be moderating this panel along with my amazing colleague Jenna Kress, who just joined on video. But I'll give Jenna and some of our panelists that are joining, and I think they're all here, a moment to turn their videos on and jump on the Zoom. So give folks a few seconds for that. Wonderful. All right. We are almost all here. Malachi, I see that you've logged on. All right, we'll give Malachi a little bit of time, and I'll start us off with, just an intro to the session. So again, our session will be about an hour long, and there will be some time after that for questions and answers. So please go ahead and put those in the Q&A section as our amazing panelists share their stories. And a little bit of context on this session and why we'll be talking about trust today. And essentially it's that trust is a core element of restorative justice, but also of community building, of healing, and of collective liberation. And so what we're asking our wonderful panelists today is to share their stories and their experiences around trust building, and the various ways that has looked in their experience as folks that have been working as RJ practitioners and have been a part of RJ efforts, movements, circles, so on and so forth. And so with that, I will reintroduce myself for anybody that is new. So again, my name is Sandra Rodriguez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am on the Restorative Justice Project team at Impact Justice. I will be one of your co-moderators today, and I'm going to pass it over to our other moderator, Jenna, to introduce herself and get us started.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you all today. I am Jenna Kress. I am calling in from the land of the Muwekma people, the Ohlone people, and the Tamian Nation in San Jose, California. I am a program associate at Impact Justice and previously worked on the Restorative Community Conferencing team in Alameda County with Community Works West, and I am so excited to be here. So I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am going to pass it off to the panelists to share a little bit about themselves. So I will pass, Amore, I will pass to you first.
Peace, everybody. I'm so honored and happy to be here, truly. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Amore. My pronouns are they and she. I am calling in from the Tongva known as Los Angeles, and this calls me to build relationships with Indigenous-led organizations like Alliance for California Traditional Arts. I'll drop a link in the chat later. I am a program associate at Impact Justice, yes, but more importantly, not even about titles. Like, I come to the work of restorative justice with a deep love of community, having experienced in community the ways that circle practices and restorative practices in general have interwoven us more deeply into relationships, have invited some of the most isolated members of community to remember they are interwoven and integral to healing. I am so thankful that this conversation is about trust, because we just had this amazing panel on safety, right? And trust is foundational to safety. We cannot have safety without trust. So what does it mean to embody trust? And for me, when I think about trust, it's about the stable knowing that all of us can be held in the full spectrum of who we are. The knowing that every aspect of ourselves, the most scary, the most painful, the parts of us that are capable of hurting and harming, can and are important to authenticity, to humanity, to life itself. And I have seen in circles that I've held in community in the Tongva of Los Angeles and in the Lenape lands of Brooklyn and New York City and throughout just other places, how folks, when they step into their true authenticity, they are offering their story as a gift, offering their needs and saying, I need this thing, and seeing everyone around them come together to meet those needs as breaking open and creating reference points for what it means to collectively liberate. And that is my honor to have witnessed that, to have experienced it myself, and to be in community here with all of you today to talk more about what it looks like to collectively heal and build. Do I pass it to the next person?
Yeah, you can pass it to Patty, Patricia, or Malachi. And Malachi, there was some Zoom technical stuff. So just so you know, the question that Amore just answered is introducing yourself and just describing how restorative justice deepened your understanding of trust. Feel free to pass it, Amore, to whoever.
Sure, I'll pass it to Patty so that Malachi can have a minute to reflect.
Awesome. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Patty Martinez. My pronouns are she, her. I am speaking as a teammate from the Community Works team. I first joined Community Works as a youth advocate for Project What, which is a program for children with incarcerated parents, in 2011. And I've been working with the Restorative Justice Diversion team since 2019. I am also connected with a couple schools. I see some of my classmates from Guilford College. Shout out to Jody, who's an alum from Guilford as well. It's a small world. And I also am a student at Mills College right now. In terms of restorative justice, wow, there has been so much growth, I think, in my just a little under 3 years at Community Works as a restorative justice facilitator. And going back to the conversation we had in the previous panel, it's about the spaces you've already been in that have this these circle practices. So when I was in PW, I didn't realize we were in circle, but every day, every time we met in circle, you go to different spaces, you see circle, and what it transforms into with diversion work, which is what I do, is a place of healing and humanity, and really picking up on the restorative justice values, which I think goes directly into trust and relationships. So it's really exciting. And I'm excited to be here on this panel with these fellow panelists. I had an opportunity to hear a little bit from Malachi yesterday, Amore in the CBO cohort calls, and I'm really honored to be in space with these brilliant minds. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Malachi.
My apologies, everyone. I'm not at home right now, so the Wi-Fi is a little messed up. So I'm actually using my phone, which is obviously better than the computer right now. Is it okay if I ask for the question one more time? I just need to hear it. I heard it, but I need to hear it again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is just to introduce yourself as you would and describe how restorative justice deepened your understanding of trust.
Right. Thank you so much. So I'm Malachi. I have many different hats. I work with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth as the Reentry and Community Restorative Justice Coordinator. That's supporting people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, around healing, supporting families and individuals in the community when it comes to harm, violence, conflict, or just building up like a social network. amongst other things. I'm a co-founder of the North Oakland Restorative Justice Council that's built around community restorative justice. How can we work together to build a restorative community that isn't reliant on city government or police, but more so relying upon each other? Also a co-founder of Tunsay Justice League, amongst other things. I can definitely go on around that, but just to answer your question about trust, I was incarcerated when I came to restorative justice, and I think one of the things that helped me out was the fact that I had the process to being able to trust myself. When I got to the point when I can trust myself and be kind to myself and knowing that, I am a human being and a worthy human being, that took me a long way. And in the process of that, I was able to build trust with others and bond with others that exist to this very day. And then because of that, when we talk about like reentry, for an example, sorry, somebody was calling me. When it comes to reentry, I'm able to feel safe in the world because I was able to build with trust with people who care about me very much. And so now I'm able to move out here in power because I know I'm taken care of. And that's the kind of impact that trust had in my life and in the life of others that I was in circle with while I was incarcerated.
Thank you. And Malachi, just so you know, I think when you got that call, we lost your face, but your face is now back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra, anything you want to add before we kind of jump into the next questions? And I just want to share true gratitude to be in space with these three incredible panelists and to hear their wisdom and their stories and perspective on trust, which is so foundational to so much of the work we do, but just how we show up in relationship with others. So yeah, Sandra, anything else before we go on to the next question?
I would actually, if the panelists are open to it, I'd love to just add a question, which is, how do you define trust? Because it's a big word. It's a big word and it's a big concept. So yeah, if our three wonderful panelists are open to it, I would love to hear how you all would respond to how you define trust. And I'll pass it over to Amore again, but of course, always feel free to pass.
Trust. I spoke a little bit about it, but I think the thing that came through when you asked this, and of course, what we love circle, we love conversation, is like trust is a feeling tone to me. It's when you walk outside and feel, or go outside and feel the sun on your face and the grass on your feet, or the warmth of a vibration, knowing that I'm held, knowing that I can be held in exactly who I am and where I am. It's, seeing some of my friends here showing up to support me, to like know about my work. It's a joy, it's laughter, it's feeling into connection. And for me, I think trust is also something that's ever evolving. It starts internally, and it happens in relationship. We need relationships to kind of test out what it feels like to touch into growth edges, or I like to say, hold the scaries, and what it means to hold those scaries gently and learn about their needs, their hopes, their dreams, trusting that happens in relationships, and that who we are in moment by moment can and will be loved. That's what trust feels like to me. What about you, Patty?
There's no trust without us. That is a little something to just make you laugh a little bit. But I think for me, the way I respond to this question, I think about being like a child of an incarcerated parent, for example, and feeling like a lot of my life had to do with just surviving and being able to trust adults or people in positions of power meant that I felt seen, heard, and safe. I think with trust, there's a level of consistency or reliability or dependability. I love hold the scaries because yes, that is part of it too. But I like to say there's no trust without us, or just there's no justice without us, or otherwise it's just us. That's this Bamboo song that I really love. I'll drop in the chat later. And so for me, trust is something that's built, all the cliches that they say, but I think the most powerful form of trust is when you mess up and you repair that, and the trust grows stronger. And to me, that is the ultimate form of trust, because everything other than that doesn't have enough substance for me. We haven't broken the trust and repaired it yet. So that's kind of my interpretation of this question. And I'll pass it over to you.
Malachi, would you like to respond to that one as well?
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a big question, and I feel like the definition of trust for me is alive and still growing. I think what comes up for me now is that trust is the process of one getting more comfortable and feeling safe in oneself eternally. And for me, like, trust isn't like 100% absolute. It doesn't mean the absence of courage, discretion, and wisdom. But I feel like for me, it's just getting to the point where I can step out and be vulnerable and knowing that I am safe on the inside. So that's what comes up for me around trust.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate those definitions. So many nuggets of wisdom. Definitely love hold the scaries. So I'll pass it back to Jenna.
Yeah, thank you all so much for that. So this next question is for Amore and Malachi. Based on your experiences as RJ practitioners, however you define that and however you kind of held RJ in your heart, what were some misconceptions around trust and trust building that you've experienced, and how are these things unlearned? Amore, can you please start us off?
Yes, this is such an important question. Thank you, Jenna. I think, we live in a dominant culture of, I call it carceral culture. It's white supremacy. It's a culture that relies on punishment to kind of create safety, right? And in this culture, we've learned that accountability and punishment are the same thing. We've learned that if some harm happens, we externalize the process of coming into accountability by saying this other thing, this system is going to come in and let us know what we need, or not even asking us about our needs, but assuming that by isolating an individual who may have harmed someone else further, by punishing them, that will create some sort of safety. And in actuality, if we look at what it means to be in relationship, what it means to remember our ancestral practices, remember who we are as humans, we need accountability to look like truth-telling. We need accountability to look like, I did this thing and I know I can do something else to make it right. I love what Patty said about trust having weight, right? About when harm occurs, we have this opportunity to really lean and deepen into relationships and trust, because we can trust that we can come back together after harm. And that means that our trust is then resilient. And so I think in restorative justice practices and circle keeping and all of this, I've seen so often that people want, or their first instinct is this punishment thing, this desire to isolate, this desire to say, you hurt me and I'm going to hurt you. And that's totally okay. It's okay to hold that first layer of reaction and responsivity, because again, this dominant culture seeps into even our imaginations about what healing can look like, about what liberation can look like. So what does it really mean to sit with our needs, to sit with the things that are alive in us and saying, I desperately actually just need to be heard, which is so often the need. I desperately so actually need to hear why this other person decided it was me, decided that the harm that occurred was meant for me. And instead, sitting and saying, I actually need a creative outcome. I need something to look beyond a box, beyond a punishment, beyond a system, taking the power back to say, I really would like to sit, listen to your story, share my story, name my needs, and find creative solutions to come together and interweave back to community and interweave back to resilient trust. Patty shared earlier in the chat, I do say this a lot, we cannot sanitize healing processes, because in order for us to heal, there has to be something hurt. There has to be a hurt for us to heal from, right? And in that hurt is the answer to liberation, in the ways that we feel isolated when we turn and ask, hurt, what are your hopes and dreams? Hurt, what are your needs? And you find out it's like, I need a warm hug. I need to go outside and play. I need a drink of water. It's like very simple and playful and loving and creative. And so for me, I think when the misconceptions I've seen and experienced in Circle in restorative justice is like this conception that we need punishment, that we need an external system to tell us how to heal, when in actuality, healing is within us, healing is within relationship, and healing is messy, and in that mess invites creativity, invites gentleness, invites playfulness, and invites a resilient trust building, a resilient and creative safety. That's what comes up for me. What about you, Malachi?
Thank you so much. And you said some things that I definitely relate with, and it just brought up something in me when you talk about these systems. And so one of the things that come up for me, so as a Black man in America, and I host Black male circles, and I'm always engaging with the brothers, and some of the brothers who are of African descent, who we are African descent, but the people from Africa who lives over here now, a lot of times what they come and tell us is that when they go through, what is it called when you come to this country? I don't know if it's customs or wherever. They tell them, hey, yo, don't trust Black Americans. Don't trust Black Americans. They are dangerous. Don't engage with them. And so they set it up in a way that already speaks to separatism. They separating us, but because we are doing these circles, we are breaking down those barriers and saying, no, what they told you, is a misconception, so we're building in that way. In our definitely language, trust in our law, in our legal system, trust in the American dream, an American way. Trust. For me, trust is an action word. To me, trust is conditional, and the system has not proven in any shape or form that for me, in my opinion, that I can trust them, and definitely a lot of the people, and so how to break through those barriers is actually listening, just like Amari mentioned, truth telling, and taking actions that can repair. And so that's one way I look at it from a systemic standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I was when I was incarcerated, many of the different prisons that I was at, from like Patriot State Prison to Corcoran State Prison, it was definitely this I don't want to use the word toxic masculine environment, definitely a hostile environment, definitely an environment where where they tell you not to express your emotions or your feelings, not to expose yourself. You know, that is seen as a weakness. When I got to San Quentin, there was a shift because restorative justice existed before I got there, so there was already a culture. And so I got to San Quentin in 2008, I believe, and people already laid the foundation. And so when I got there, I started noticing that people are being very vulnerable and sharing about deep, deep events that happened in their life that impacted them. And to me, it sounded foreign. I did not understand that there was a space for that. I didn't know how to deal with it. What is this thing? What are they doing here? And so in the end, there were many others who said, no, I can't do this. I'm not taking a victim offender education group. I'm not exposing myself. I can't trust that. And some of those same people are now circle keepers to this day. And I know them by name. The same people who was out here doing really, really beautiful work in the community. And the same with me to a degree. And so I stepped out into restorative justice, not in complete trust, but I had to get to the point where I can trust in myself, trust that I could take care of myself. And it was a process. And I got really, really stronger as the process of being in this specific group that I'll tell you about, the victim offender education group, as it went on, to where now I can trust the people that's involved in that process. And I don't know if I'm going on, but there is a misconception in the community that vulnerability is not safe. You know, and so especially as a man, I look at vulnerability as a strength and a gateway for someone else to be able to open it up and share deeply. So the way that break that barrier is to be an example of vulnerability. For me as a circle keeper, I want to be able to answer any question that I ask and be very open about it. And so a lot of time when that space is laid out, and even if they're hearing about it the first time, eventually someone can come to the point where they can trust and be vulnerable and step out in that power. And so, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate, Malachi, what you just said about being able to answer any question you ask. I think that's just so incredibly important. And I wanted to transition the conversation a little bit over to the topic of credible messengers and how important credible messengers are in restorative justice. And before I ask the question, just to contextualize it, because I know that there are a lot of ways to define credible messengers, and the way that we'll be defining it today is really as folks with lived experience who come from communities most impacted by the criminal legal system. So with that notion of credible messengers in mind, I wanted to ask Malachi and Patty, why are credible messengers in restorative justice so important to the trust building process? And Malachi, if you can start us off, please.
Thank you. Long story short, it's something about seeing someone who has experienced the same thing. And I'm gonna use an example. I think this is the best way. When I was incarcerated, there was a time when people who had life sentences were not coming home, period. If you had 1 year to life, 7 years to life, 25, it didn't matter. You were never getting out. That was the saying. You're going to basically be here for the rest of your life. And then around 2007 or 2008, I started to witness the first person go home who had a life sentence. And then I saw someone who had a life sentence come back in, dressed up in a suit, dressed nice, and coming to sharing. And it was something about that impacted me, that gave me hope that can be me someday. And so this person who came in was a credible messenger with lived experience. And that's powerful. When people could see someone who've experienced the same thing and come out on the other side of it, that gives hope. That gives hope. and it's something that people can be grounded in. For me, as a former gang member from Los Angeles, for someone who's also been in juvenile hall, been incarcerated, done some terrible things, I'm able to go and speak to people who are similar and have their attention in a way that possibly others can't. Now, in some areas, I probably can't, like, because I don't have that lived experience. And I recognize that. Every time that I go inside and share my story or a part of me, for some reason, the room gets quiet and I got people's attention because they're looking at someone, young people, looking at someone who's been through it, who came out on the other side of it, and they see themselves. It's probably a part of themselves that can see themselves in me and give them hope that they can come out on the other side, right? And so I'm able to build a relationship in that way. Now, my experience isn't just incarceration, isn't just gangs. I'm also a son. I'm also in music. I'm also many different things, right? And so I'm able to relate just by being Black in a Black community, right? And so oftentimes when we support families who lost their loved ones to homicide, if they're a Black family, guess what? I'm going to be the one to go, or one of my colleagues who are Black going to be the one who go and lead. If someone is Asian or something else, I would definitely try to find someone else to be the lead. If I can't, I still got to go because I still want to show support, at the same time. But like strategically, I try to think things through. And so I'll leave it at that and pass it on.
I'm soaking up everything that everyone is saying, taking notes on the side, because I do think we are hearing some real wisdom and truth telling right now. The way I'm responding to this question, the majority of the work that I do is focused on youth and youth development. So I want to take that lens, just like, preface that. I live next to a train. So kind of what the first panel was saying was there's this awareness of self. There's this awareness of self, and for youth specifically, they get most of their knowledge from their families or schools. That's where power dynamics are first introduced to them. I like to, when I'm talking to youth or just explaining like our process, I try to remind people to be awareness of the self they bring in our space, because there's the person you are with your parents, the person you are with your friends, the person you are when you're alone. And the goal is to hopefully bring all of those different people into one space. Credible messengers. So when you have family and school being where you're getting these messages from, let's say family specifically. So there's been times where the best credible messengers are parents themselves. For example, if a youth is going through restorative justice diversion and the youth is like, I don't trust, or the parents like, I don't trust systems, they mess me up in these ways, then our youth is going to be like, nah, F that, because I know I trust my family and they got me. And then I've had on the flip side, other parents say, wow, like if this was available for me, look what could have been avoided. And that's the reason why I got into this work, is because of my system impactedness with my dad. I lost my dad to gun violence. But before that, he struggled with addiction and incarceration. And it was this cycle. And so when we go back to, I would say like identity, right? Going back to this, this conflict of, I'm not trusting people at my school. I'm not trusting, because these are the messages that I was told. Like, I was thinking more of a personal story of how my dad used to kind of not always talk with love, but talk with, this hardened shell. And my mom would say like, don't talk to her like that, or like, you're bullying her. And he's like, I'm not bullying her. I'm preparing her for the real world, because that's the world that she's going to live in. No, she's not my son, but like, yeah, she's white passing, but she's still at the end of the day, gonna need to be able to protect herself, stand up for herself. And that started in my home. And so the messages that we're taught at home inform us of how we're going to respond in the world based on this generational trauma or this generational identity of where we stand in the world. And so for credible messengers in RJ, it's always best when somebody who's actually been impacted or had the opportunity to kind of confront this system of power or this issue. Like, I want to go real personal and just say, ooh, don't cry now. You know, when I lost my dad to gun violence, it was very shortly after I started this restorative justice job, right? And for somebody who's always been on the side of the system that was like, F the cops, they took my dad away. Now I'm like, oh damn, I hope they're able to find me some justice in this process because it's the one I'm getting. I want to shout out Jenna, who supported me in being like somebody I looked up to at CW as, you know, trust this credible messenger who embodied restorative justice and supported me in actually having something to say for the people who murdered my dad. And she came to the court. I couldn't have done it without you, Jenna, but it was all of the different preparations, the conversations that happened outside of work, outside of with these one-on-one just relationship buildings. And when we're talking about trust with survivors of crime and what are credible messengers for them, what does that look like? That's where we struggle with the framing. It takes so much courage to talk about trust and to talk about our experiences in large forms like this right now. And I would say maybe I couldn't do this if I didn't have Project What when I was 14. That kind of prepared me to be able to be vulnerable with people outwardly. But at the end of the day, when people log off and it's just me in my room, like, I know that I have trust with the people that have supported me to getting this far. And that's the community aspect. That's why with the work that we do with restorative justice, we say that there's 4 levels of harm. It's not just the person who might have been directly impacted, but it's yourself too. It's your family and your support systems, people that care about our well-being, even if it's not people who are in positions of power. And also it's the ripple effects of our community, because when you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, and that's just what you get, all of us or none, right? And so by handing the mic to people who have been impacted and who have done this, and by creating opportunities for them to be a part, to have past participants actually have a voice and a stake in the work that we're doing, that's what we're doing at CW. That's what we're building towards, because we shouldn't be the ones holding the mic. We should be passing it. And that's where I think the credible messenger comes from. That was a lot. But that's the way I'm responding to that question. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, both of you. I love what you just said, Patty, around we shouldn't be holding the mic, we should be passing it. And I think that's something that kind of both you and Malachi touched on, and this fact that like there were credible messengers that came into your life that provided you with an opportunity to see someone else kind of, what were you saying, Patty? Like, it takes courage to trust and to talk about our experiences, and there were people in your lives that gave you that courage to talk about your experiences and to trust. And I imagine that the two of you also have then gone and passed that on to others, and shown up for others because someone showed up for you in that way, and that's really powerful. So I'm going to shift into this next question. This question is for Patty and Amore. So can you both share about a time where you've witnessed or experienced trust being developed through restorative justice or restorative practices? And Patty, can you start us off?
Yeah, sure. So one of the best experience of trust building that I've seen happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, before we were completely in shelter in place. And the historical context or the historical harms between the Asian and Black community and the misconceptions there. So I had a responsible youth who was biracial, Black, that's how he showed up in spaces. And then I had a person harm who was Asian. And when I reached out to him, the survivor of this, he was very, of course, skeptical. Like, this was the first time anybody had asked him, or that he shared with anyone, because he didn't share with his family or friends that he was assaulted. And, that's how he broke his nose. That's how his nose was messed up. And so I had to show up with a lot of, I feel like when we're showing up as facilitators, we try our best to ground ourselves, kind of like what Jody was saying earlier, to ground ourselves and to also be the calm, listening presence, but also knowing when to kind of be able to sit not just in calmness, but in their anger, and to be able to support with the, I would say, like the wild flames, and support with kind of containing that, to see what can support with that. Is it resources? Is it the opportunity to speak about it more? Do you want to just have more one-on-one conversations? And it took about maybe 5 prep meetings before we were able to sit in space with our responsible youth. And for me, what was the most powerful is just when he asked the responsible youth, like, the last time we saw each other, you caused harm to my body. Is it possible for, us to like hug each other, so that when I leave, the feeling that I'm getting is not of, and some people might think, oh, that's weird. Like, why would you want to touch someone? Because I was raised personally not to be touching, but the harm for this person was to his body, and what he wanted was to repair that. And the responsible youth at the end of conference asked me, like, is this enough? And to me, that's not the person. I'm not the person to ask. So we opened it up to the conference space. I'm speaking about conference, assuming that we all know what conference is. So let me just take a second to explain a little bit about my work in restorative justice diversion. So at Community Works, we partner with the San Francisco DA's office and Public Defender's office and the Alameda County offices as well. And we receive referrals pre-charge. So this might be somebody got arrested, but they never went to court. They instead were diverted before having to engage with the judicial process other than the arrest, so pre-charge. And so I contact them. There's a willingness to participate and know that we're working towards a conversation of healing with people who were impacted, which goes towards the 4 levels of harm, which includes self, the person, family, and community. And we bring different people from these spaces. Maybe we identify a community member, or maybe there's already somebody who is in the community that's involved that wants to participate. We have a conversation, and together the conference participants co-create a restorative plan. So this is their way of making amends with the community, with the person, with their families, and with themselves. That is their alternative to being put on probation, for example. And so that's an example of a conference space that I was in. There's something called RJ Magic that facilitators talk about, and it's really just the feeling that transcends from people that come in as strangers and leave as community. And that's something that's really beautiful to see and be a part of. And if y'all are interested in being a part of a restorative community conference, I will put a volunteer link in the chat so I can contact you and see what would be the best fit for both survivors, community members, and people who are interested in getting tapped into other resources. And I will pass it over to Jenna. Who is it going to?
We're going to pass to Amore. Thanks, Patty, so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that powerful share. I love the simple creativity of it, like speaking to so much of our need, just being connection, and how like a hug can really create a new reference point for embodied trust. So I love that share. And I'll also, my head and my heart is with this young person that I worked with in New York City. I worked in these facilities where young people who had gone through the system were mandated. And clearly, you know, already we're not in a context of restoration. It's yes, a rehabilitative facility, but there's so many layers in that context that can feel really punitive and sometimes reproduce the thing that we're trying to get away from, in that there are rules, regulations, expectations where the young person and people in those facilities don't necessarily have a say of their own trajectory of healing. But that's not to say that we didn't engage in some restorative practices. So this particular young person came in because there was an instance of real family violence in the home. She did some she got into a conflict with her stepfather, and then came into the facility through that. And she's so smart and progressed so much in the context of this work. And we got really close. She was gay, and like we had queer community together a lot and often. And she was ready to go home after about 6 months in the facility. And she went on a home pass, which is when you go out to home, even though you're still living in the facility for the most part. And during this home pass, she did something wrong, messed up on one of the rules. I won't go into it because that's not the point. And everyone was so confused. Everyone was like, well, why would you do this? It's like self-sabotaging. You know that like this last home pass was meant for you to demonstrate that you're ready to go home. Really sort of, you already hear the punitive, there's no one asking why or what was the motivation behind what you did. So I sat with her and I was like, you know, I know something else is going on. Like we have this relationship, you know, you can talk to me. She's like, yeah, you're right. I know I can talk to you, Miss Amore, which I was like, please don't, please don't do none of that. With just Amore is cool, you know? And in this really vulnerable moment, she was like, I'm afraid to go home because I haven't come out to my mom. I haven't come out to my mom. And that's even the whole reason that I came into this facility in the first place. I like can't, you know, I don't feel safe. And I feel safe here because I'm out and I feel like you're one of the people who really embraces and accepts me. And I've learned about like queer history with you, and we've had all of these conversations, and I don't think I'm going to have that at home. And so there was this follow-up conference to kind of develop what we were going to do as a plan of action going home. And I said, well, what would it look like for you to just have this conversation with your mom? I can be there. Who else would you like to be there to support, to see, you know, what it would be like to stand in your truth and be held in that? Because there was also some other family work going on where the mom had reiterated her full support for this young person. I mean, intuitively, we're often aware of these dynamics. And so we came into this and they wrote out a letter. She wrote out a letter to her mom. It didn't even talk about the like instance of breaking the rules, because that wasn't the point. The point was she needed a space to safely let her know and speak and truth tell, like, mom, this is who I am, and I really am afraid that you're not going to accept me and I need to be held. And she spoke her letter and there were tears, and the mom was just like, I understand and I love you, and I want you to know that no matter what, you know, we are going to get through anything, and I embrace you and I want to support you. And it was just this most beautiful moment of like trust building, of that young person trusting herself to tell her story, of that young person trusting me, the other people around her who she had developed and cultivated relationships with, to say, I need support in doing this thing, of the mom saying and coming in and saying, I trust myself as a mother to take the steps forward to make sure that my daughter feels safe in my home, feels embraced, loved, and affirmed. And it was a reference point for what it could be like to hold the scaries together, what it could be like for family to really look in authenticity and embrace that vulnerability as an opportunity to collectively heal. And, you know, there was like months later, this young person had graduated. I was like at this like conference, and she ran up, and I had written her like this little letter of support, and like, just like, you know, queer family forever, you get to choose your family no matter what, all these little affirmations, silly things that we had. And she ran up to me and she's like, hey, like, I am here for a probation. So she was now on probation for another case, right? And she was like, but I have this letter with me and I keep it with me always, because you remind me that like, no matter what happens, I get to make choices that interweave myself in community, that interweave myself in relationship. And I say that imperfection of healing, that's what I was talking about earlier. We can't sanitize the healing process, because it's not about this young person never having committed another wrong. It's not about this young person never, oh, and she also said, and my mom's outside, she's with me to go visit my probation officer. It was like this new, I'm gonna support you no matter what, even if it means that we're gonna like go through this process again, or you're gonna mess up, because it's going to look differently. It's not going to be this like ideal whatever. It's going to be grounded in reality, and that reality includes those mistakes and includes a resilient trust, back to what Patty was talking about. So yeah, I think restorative justice and these processes of restoration touch into the scary places and hold the full spectrum of who we are, which means we mess up, which means that when we mess up, we can hold each other wholly and in relationship, and learn from it and grow together. Pass it back to Sandra or Jenna.
Thank you so much, Amore, and so beautifully said. Such a powerful story that you shared, and you as well, Patty. Thank you so much. It's definitely a lot to hold on to and to be inspired by and to think about. So really appreciate what you both shared. And I am gonna jump into our final question for panelists that Jenna and I have. But before I do that, I want to remind folks listening to, please add anything that you'd like to the Q&A. We'll have time to answer questions from the Q&A afterwards. So just one more reminder to do that. And I'll go ahead and ask our last question for now. And this one is for everyone. So to all three of you, I'd like to ask, how can folks listening to this conversation today begin to work with their communities to build trust in restorative justice? And Malachi, if you could start us off, that would be great.
I think, the obvious thing that comes up for me is definitely connect with an organization. Maybe the organization is local. Maybe there's some organization that moves in a way that connects with your spirit. And also restorative justice training. I know I heard someone talking about it earlier. Maybe that was Tosh or someone. You can definitely reach out to either it's Our Joy, Restore Oakland, Community Works for the conference and training, himself for victim offender dialogue training. So there's so many different type of ways to get engaged in restorative justice. And I know the process looks different in certain ways. Not the fundamental principles of RJ exists in all of these organizations, but there's different ways that it show up. And last but not least, I feel like all it takes is one person to have a thought and reach out to somebody else and start it. If it's somebody in your community, somebody that you know, and y'all both come into agreement on something that you want to do that's from your heart, that's all it takes. Because at the end of the day, Restore Oakland was a thought. Community Works was a thought by somebody. Ahimsa, Impact Justice, all of these, someone had a thought and connected with somebody else and they moved. And so we have creative spirits and we have the power to create, and that is a gift. And so we can create what we want to do in the community. So I will leave it with that.
Yeah, I can.
Patty.
So I put the ask out. The call to action for engaging with CW would be to definitely let us know if you're interested in participating in a restorative conference. Also, there are some amazing circles happening, like Jody mentioned earlier at Restore Oakland. I know Kevin Martin, who's also on the call, has been working to Kevin Martin, the SF Rising have all been working on creating the RJ ecosystem for the Bay Area. You can see some of the different orgs that are popping up and also, or already doing the work, amplifying the work. So we're not reinventing it and leaving the power with the experts, because they're all of these programs have their own expertise, including Impact Justice, who has been an amazing an amazing researcher and evaluator, and has supported so many organizations with implementing their RJD programs across the nation. So check out their manuals as well, I would say. And again, I'll pop it in the chat and pass it over to Amore.
Yeah, I think, for me, restorative, thank y'all so much for uplifting these concrete things. I'm gonna go metaphorical. I think restorative justice is embodied. Like, I think it's a paradigm that invites us to remember our capacity to build relationships, to be in relationships with ourselves, and to be in relationships with not just each other, like as humans, but with all beings, with like the earth, with the sun, the stars, plant allies, to connect in ways that see us as all a part of like life. I think what it looks like to do that in community is to begin to ask each other really vulnerable questions and hold space. I think I think Jody was speaking to this earlier, institutionalizing this idea of like, there are restorative justice practitioners and there are some who are not, which yes, there are those truths, right? Like, you can facilitate RCC processes or restorative community conferences, you can facilitate harm circles, you can do all of these things. And also, at its core, restorative justice is about relationships. So what does it look like in your own relationships and communities? What are y'all doing to connect and build further trust within each other? In moments of harm or discomfort, what does it look like to not externalize, not avoid, but actually sit together and say, hey, you hurt me, and this is what I need to move forward better. And one thing that's also coming to mind is like Adrienne Marie Brown. I love her so much. Amazing, a gift. She has this book called "We Will Not Cancel Us," which talks about carceral culture and call out culture and the similarities between the two. This idea that we can simply call someone out for doing wrong or making, hurting someone and isolating them and shaming them and putting them in a box over there, as if that will resolve or move us forward. In actuality, that isolation creates separation in ourselves, means that if I make a mistake, if I commit wrong, I know that that's the outcome. So I'm just not going to look at this hard thing. Instead, I would say, when harm occurs in and amongst ourselves, because harm is innately a part of life, hurt is innately a part of life. And I'll say the difference between hurt and harm. So hurt does not have to mean harm, folks. Harm is when hurt festers, when it becomes traumatic, when it becomes something that is exponentially increased, as opposed to hurt, which is something that we hurt ourselves and each other a lot and often, but in our culture, it's one that doesn't allow for the healing to take place when hurt happens. So it does become harm. So what does it look like in relationships that you're currently in when hurt occurs to interrupt those cycles so that it doesn't fester, so that it doesn't become interlayers of harm, and instead becomes a place of resilient healing? And so I think the call to action for me is really looking at your relationships and starting there, because that's the remembering that takes place. That's how restorative justice was born. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you all so much. And I am, let's see, actually my computer froze a little bit. Jenna, did everybody respond? Did you all go to the, okay, perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to you, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amore, Malachi, Patty, for all of the gifts that you all have given us today. I am so honored to be able to listen and sit here alongside you all and be in this work alongside you all. So we have a few questions in the Q&A. Again, people continue to share things in the Q&A if you have questions. And the first question, you all are welcome to answer if you have an answer that you want to give to this. I'm going to give a quick answer to this first question. The first question is from Carrie Simon. I'd love to hear how someone without lived experience thinks about building trust within communities most impacted by the criminal legal system in service to the RJ process. So as someone who is not a part of a community that is most directly impacted by the criminal legal system, who has been a facilitator in RJ processes, I'll just say across the board, as RJ practitioners, none of us are experts on anyone's own lived experiences besides ourselves. And I will never understand what it is like to be in anyone else's body and in anyone else's shoes and skin but my own. And there are certain experiences that I haven't been through that the majority of the young people that I worked with when I was facilitating have been through. And so it's really important for me, and I'm not going to speak on this too long because I really do, I want to kind of give more space to these panelists to speak on their experiences and to answer some of these other questions. But to understand yourself in relationship to the work that you are doing, to do intense, critical, self-reflective work on yourself and the context of the work that you show up in, and the dynamics of you and the power you hold in relationship to the people you are working alongside, no matter what that looks like, and to understand when to step back, and when it is not your role to step in, and when someone else can step in and do something that you can't do. And so maybe that means inviting someone else to facilitate a process that, like Malachi was saying, who might be better suited for that process. But I'm happy to talk with anyone about this and kind of go into it offline as well, if anyone wants to follow up on this question. But I think really understanding yourself in relationship to the work that you're doing, and understanding what your role is and what your role is not, and where potentially others can step up and do the work in a way that is different than what you can offer. And I'll leave it at that for now, and just reiterating, none of us are experts in the experience of anyone besides ourselves. And some of us can understand what others are going through better than others. But the best thing that we can do is listen to people and trust that they know what's best for themselves always. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for that question. Panelists, if any of you want to answer that question, you're welcome to jump in and answer. Otherwise, we'll go on to another question.
I'll just say that in the chat, there is a written response by a team member.
Awesome.
Works that kind of expands a little bit what Jenna was saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. All right, thank you for that question. We're going to go on to the next question, which is from Audrey Anderson. And that question, and yes, thank you so much, Abby, for sharing your answer as well. So from Audrey Anderson, you asked the question about credible messengers and examples were given. However, what is the context of this concept in restorative justice work. So if anyone has an answer to that, I'll open it up. Maybe we'll start with Amore, and you all are welcome to pass if you don't have an answer to this question.
Yeah, I think credible messengers, and I was like reflecting on this other question too, right? I think because we can only ever be experts of our own lived experience, it's so important to continuously be curious about our own positionality, our own beliefs, our own values, what we're carrying into the circle. And so with credible messengers, I think the thing that comes to mind is I actually used to work inside of the New York City family court system. And I came in to specifically advocate for restorative responses to harm and to train and on trauma-informed practices and how inherently the system re-traumatizes and perpetuates those circumstances that produce trauma in the first place. And, you know, I think what was most helpful was building relationships with prosecutors who could talk to other prosecutors about this. Clearly, I am not a prosecutor, and I hold a lot of identities that maybe created distance from the things that I would say. So who would be the credible person to deliver those messages? Because who we are is going to filter what other people are able to learn and lean into from us, right? So being able to build those relationships and then develop other credible messengers. So in this context, it was prosecutor to prosecutor to then say, hey, I learned this thing about how we can better support the young people that we say that we care about. And I think we can move differently. And little by little, those relationships began to expand and build more of a sort of collective group of a community of prosecutors who were more advocating for responses to harm. So for community-based responses to harm, it expanded the diversion practice in general. So when I think about credible messengers, I think about really going inward and thinking of our own lived experiences and how we can lean into those experiences to build relationships and connections with others who can carry the work forward. Because all of us are a part of community. That includes the DA, and that's complicated. So what does it mean to invite the DA into circle if that circle is gonna, of course, hold them accountable, right? Because accountability can only really happen in relationships. So I think about that, and I'd love to hear from other panelists on this question too. So I'll open it up.
I'm just interested in the person who asked the question is, it's about, like, as it connects to restorative justice, like, should I have some sort of lived experience in order to be a circle keeper for someone with a different life experience? And if it means that, then there's a different answer. And so a credible circle keeper for me, but that's the question. I just think it's just authenticity, honesty, good listener, and someone who is humble and also powerful at the same time. And so for me, I wouldn't mind being in this space with someone who doesn't have the same lived experience as I am, but holding space for me, right? And so it's something about that. I got an example of that real quick. I don't want to be on too long. Me and one of my coworkers went to Seattle for a training. It was majority Black training, but she's white. She was standing up in front of a board writing something. When I was doing the RJ training, she was writing something. Somebody in the circle passed the note to somebody else, and then they spoke up in power, and they were saying, why is the white lady teaching about restorative justice standing up while the young Black man is sitting down? what's up with that dynamic? They called us on it. And what she did, she immediately sat down and said, whatever y'all want to do, however y'all want, if y'all want me to leave, if y'all want me to be here and be quiet. She did it in such in a humble way that it impacted the circle, and she sat down for the whole another day and a half. And I ended up having to lead the training, so it helped me step up and learn and kind of like start to lead trainings too. But she developed relationships that exist to this day, and that was about 5 years ago. She was so humbled about it. She didn't defend herself. She didn't say, well, I'm doing this, that, and the other. She listened, humbled herself, sat down, and was willing to let them lead and guide what they wanted in that circle. And it was beautiful, and that was beautiful. So that's like an example of a way to actually show up when with people that you know, they have a different life experience, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Patty and Malachi. Okay, the next question is for Malachi. Malachi, it's from either Gina or Gina Marie Leslie. I really loved what you said about building that internal trust. Oh, actually, it's to all participants, to all panelists. What are some ways and practices that you work to build trust within yourself, which will inherently lead to building trust within community and lay the foundation of restorative healing? And Malachi, we'll start with you since you were the one who kind of brought up in how you were talking about trust and restorative justice, the importance of internal trust.
Thank you for that. And I actually have to leave. Someone speak on it, and I have to leave. I have to, a circle. I have to down. I'm in a place where I'm doing it. I have to do a circle. I'm a little late, but and so for me, with that question, I have the luxury and benefit of actually having space help for me for over 5 years straight. And when I came, I'm talking about the Victim Within Education group. I did it for a year, and I ended up being involved for another 4 years. And so with all this time of actually looking at the worst things I ever did, the worst thing that ever happened to me, connecting the dots in my life, I was able to find myself and get to know myself in a way that I never did. And in that becomes a place of confidence for me, knowing who I am, knowing where I come from, and knowing where I'm moving. Without it, I probably lack trust in myself. So that experience, that willingness to be vulnerable and look at stuff that like it's hard to really look at, but uncover it. It helped me to get to the point where, I only trusted myself, but I can also be vulnerable in a place where some people wouldn't. And that means I can share my story. I can talk about the worst thing I ever done, what happened to me, and not really trip on what somebody else think about it to a degree, right? And so if someone say, you're weak for sharing that, I'm not tripping. I don't need, personally, I'm at the point in my life where I don't necessarily need a strong container to be able to speak about it. I just speak about it in the power anyway. That's just me personally. And so it took time and a lot of experience and humility. And so, yeah, I definitely have to jet out. Before I jet out, I definitely want to uplift self-care. As space holders, I'm wondering who's holding space for us. And sometimes I get drained. I just want to uplift self-care and know that self-care isn't a cliche. And I'll pass it from there.
Thank you so much, Malachi. Before you head off, I think we can all appreciate everything that you've shared today and you being here with us. And also thank you for going out there and being in that circle that you're about to be in. Amore?
Yeah, do we have time? Are we good
This
on?
is going to be the last question.
Okay, that's good. I unmuted, so now I'll answer it. I think exactly what Malachi was saying about self-care. I think it's this, we cannot pour from an empty source. Like, we need to continuously fill ourselves. And so for me, what self-care has begun to look like is really embodiment and engaging in somatic practices to almost match the intensity of the hardest, most harmful traumatic things in my nervous system, to release it, to retrain my own nervous system, to be able to trust safety, to be able to create reference points within myself, to know that I am safe, to feel it embodied, because trauma means that we often dysregulate and are misunderstanding our environment to think that we're in a place that we aren't actually in. So recontextualizing that and matching the intensity through, whether that's like, it's looked like running recently, but stretching, drinking water, treating my body as sacred, because it is, because this is how we experience and live life in this one body. And I think also just having a lot of grace. I think my perspective on my own self and building that perspective is like, I am imperfect and I love that. Or my perfection is resilient, which means that it includes the parts of myself that I haven't uncovered, the most vulnerable, the most hurtful, the times that I have hurt others, the times that I have been hurt. And that is perfect because it's a way that we grow. It's how we find the compass to growth. So I think that being able to integrate and hold space for all of me allows me to reflect that back to community, to know that because I have held my hurt, my harm, my trauma with love, care, and grace, I can create that reference points inside of me and then offer that back to those around me as well, because all of us are just on this journey growing together. And I'll pass it to Patty.
Yeah, everything that everyone has already said. One of my favorite quotes that I hear Amore say is just, you can't sanitize healing work. I think that is the most realist thing I've ever heard, because if you're a program that's rooted in humanity and healing, you should know that it's messy. And you should know that your team should be part of that filling source. They should be part of what supports you to uphold this work, because none of us do it alone. We're all interconnected and depend on each other for support, for space, for healing, because even just being a part of some of these spaces, like, we're sponges and we soak up energies or vibes, whatever you want to call it. And at the same time, we're putting ourselves in work where we need to be the consistent and stable energy source to kind of support with taming the fires, like I said earlier, and refueling that passion, or that flame for something that can still be productive or useful, and build communities up instead of tearing them down. And yeah, just realizing who is in your community, your circle of support, your circle of trust, and yeah, just continue to be in this learning zone. I think too often yes, we are experts of our own narrative, and we're constantly learning about all of the other narratives that exist. And one of my favorite quotes and teachings of the Zapatistas is, we live in a world where many worlds exist and coexist, and we just have to keep that in mind. Just remember that everybody's going through really complicated lives, and we need to be able to have grace and patience for their complexities. And that is my response to this. And I hope that a quote from this is taken away and it sparks a conversation, because that's also what RJ does, is it sparks conversations and makes you think of things you might have not. And what do you do with that then? Now that that's kind of like Buddhism too. Like, once you're enlightened, it's your job to then enlighten others about the power of the transformation that can be with RJ. So that's my response. Thanks y'all for just being a part of this space.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for closing us off in that way, Patty and Amore and Malachi, who's already stepped away. So much brilliance and wisdom. So sending endless gratitude to our three panelists today. And we are ready for a little break. We've had a long and nourishing and full morning. So please, everyone, step outside, breathe some fresh air, look at a beautiful leaf or a flower if you can, get some snacks and water. And we're going to come back at 12 o'clock for session 3, and that'll be followed by optional breakout sessions that we'll share some information with you all on at the end of session 3. So we'll see you all back. Thank you so much to everyone so far. We'll see you back at 12 Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Thank you all.